Hello everyone, it's Jamarl Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. I hope everyone is good. I'm checking this to see if this goes up. For the last 2 hours, I've been struggling to try to get online. But I am online, I am pushing up. I hope everything is good. It is Jesus Christ in the evening. It's been not a bad day, it's a long day. And it's late here, and I have a few stories that I want to do, so let's do the news. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the content through Patreon, and I want to thank all the patrons that do support the content. Not just patrons, there are people who assist in PayPal and everything else. It's appreciated, guys. Thank you very much. It helps this show tick along. BRET Kavanaugh is confirmed. Stop BRET Kavanaugh has failed. Personally, I don't necessarily think that the campaign to stop BRET Kavanaugh should stop now. Fact is, BRET Kavanaugh lied several times, and those lies need to be challenged. And unlike an allegation that took place 40 years ago, the FBI can make a determination on somewhat of a yes or no on whether or not a particular point is true. That's going to be a separate video, so I'm not necessarily going to go into that now. But what I do want to talk about is something a little different. It's something, a tweet came up by Partisan Girl, and she kind of made this point of, look, why don't Democrats deal with this guy from the standpoint of Bush? And my thing to her was, well, I mean, ultimately these guys are on the same page as Bush. But I don't think that's quite exactly accurate. And so I want to go into it, and I want to flesh this out, and I want to talk about it. First, let's stop pretending that the Supreme Court has legitimacy from the standpoint of something that is there to purely interpret the laws. Meaning, this person is on the bench, and this person, in fairness, as fair as a human being can be, is sitting there interpreting the law, struggling with the Constitution, wrestling with it, trying to understand it. Let's stop that, because that's not true. These are partisan actors. It would be no different if you had the Republican Party on the Supreme Court. For all intents and purposes, that's what you have on the Supreme Court. Partisan bias actors. Are we really to believe that the Supreme Court, the body where Mitch McConnell made the decision to break all precedent in order to hold up Obama's pick for over a year, wouldn't even bring Merrick Garland, milquetoast Merrick Garland, wouldn't even bring him up for a vote? And we're supposed to believe that the outcome of that is going to be honesty and fairness, as opposed to Trump putting on some Lavey and Hooker onto the Supreme Court. They wouldn't fight so hard if these were just honest brokers and honest actors. They wouldn't fight so hard. They even use, hey, remember the Supreme Court as a last resort of trying to get people to vote Democrat. They wouldn't fight so hard if it wasn't full of partisan bias actors. That's the first point. Let's stop pretending that these guys have legitimacy from the standpoint of going about their way trying to interpret the law. Several cases are coming up. I did a video recently, just now, about the scientists at the UN all around the world, thousands of cases that they were reviewing, thousands of reports and research and studies and everything else, and came to the conclusion that it's worse than they thought. It is worse than they thought. Now, ExxonMobil knew that climate change was a real thing going back, if I'm not mistaken, back in the 1960s, 70s, or 80s. I forget which year. But either way, we're talking about like 50, 60 years ago that their scientists had already uncovered that global warming and climate change was going to be an issue, regardless of whatever you want to call it. They buried it. Now, ExxonMobil, a case is coming up. In fact, I can show you the tweet that is mentioning this right here. Whoa, what is this? That's weird. All right. Reminder, Brett Kavanaugh will be joining the Supreme Court at the exact moment that ExxonMobil is petitioning the court to block state investigations in the fossil fuel industry role in climate change. What do you think Brett Kavanaugh is going to vote on that? Let's be honest, you already know. You already know. His vote is going to be for the owner class. You already know his vote. It's a canned item. If you know that his vote is a canned item, then you can't go with this idea that the Supreme Court is an honest actor. There's another reason. Kavanaugh should be radioactive beyond the rape allegation. I don't know what took place 40 years ago. I have no idea. I don't know if Kavanaugh got grabby after getting wasted. I don't know if what's her name is making it up for purely political ends. No clue. It is irrelevant to my analysis on whether or not Kavanaugh should be in the Supreme Court. Anything pertaining to the Bush administration, especially dealing with the lawyers that were around during the time of the torture and during the time of the ramp up to war, should be radioactive. The society should see it as radioactive. I would make further argument to say that George Bush should be in a prison cell, and many of the actors and the people who were around him who was making determinations and seeing what George Bush was doing, meaning this guy was a lawyer for Bush, just to nail down. This was Rolling Stones. To start with, Bush right here. To start, Bush flouted the law repeatedly and has never been called to account. Recall the failed Supreme Court nomination of Harriet Miers as a top lawyer for the George W. Bush administration. Miers was seen at the time as a Bush loyalist who might shield the administration's legacy for a coming generation, including against court cases arising out of the administration's use of torture, black sites, mass surveillance, to say nothing of its march to war in Iraq under false pretenses. Kavanaugh is Miers 2.0. He is Bush's lieutenant who was not only a lawyer in the Florida recount of 2000, but inherited the pivotal job of staff secretary to the president from Miers as she rose through the White House ranks. Legal experts see Kavanaugh as a presidential protector. He has a radical view of executive power and privilege and has repeatedly raised doubts about whether presidents are accountable to other branches of government. That's amazing. That's amazing and profound by itself. Now, let's be very clear. George W. Bush went into a country, lied the United States government into a war, cherry-picked information, and used that cherry-picked information to give the public a biased perspective of events. Let's not short the media's role in this. After all, the media pushed this forward without necessarily giving any critical skepticism to what the Bush administration was putting out. Not to mention it was being used as a useful idiot. So Cheney will put in an anonymous tip. The person who gets the anonymous tip will make a story out of it. Then Cheney would turn around and reference the story that was given as an anonymous tip. But because it's an anonymous tip, nobody knows that Cheney was the original source of the story. All sorts of shenanigans was taking place. Getting rid of Phil Donahue on MSNBC because they wanted a unified view of the world on this stuff. That in and of itself, like that part, before we go anywhere else, the lying and the cherry picking and bringing this country into war, manufacturing information in order to get this country into a war. The president of the United States lied to the United States to get the United States to invest $7 trillion in addition to 4,000 human beings that are Americans and 1 million Iraqis who are no longer on the face of this earth. There should be consequences for that. If I walk out and have a bag of pot on me, I may get busted and taken to jail. But George Bush could eradicate 1 million people off the face of the earth, let alone what took place after the fact, meaning the chaos that spread all through the Middle East based on George Bush's actions. How is there no consequence to that? How is there no consequence? Now, in addition to there not being consequences for that, the lawyers for George W. Bush, in this case, Kavanaugh, was right there. He could see it all. The enhanced interrogation that was really just torturing human beings, many of which were innocent, mind you. This vacuum cleaner of sucking up people to black sites, radical rendition or extraordinary renditioning, literally going into other countries and ripping people off the streets. Potentially with the help of the intelligence services in those countries, but certainly not with the consent of the population itself. Kavanaugh was there for it all. If you're a new president and you're coming into office and the previous president flouted the fact that he was torturing human beings, and the torture of the human beings was used to try to create some kind of trail to associate Osama bin Laden, with 9/11 with Saddam Hussein, a link that didn't exist. You're a new president. What do you do? What do you do? Now, I ask this question because this question is not a minor question. Fact is, we have an imperial presidency. Is the president a king? Are there laws that deal with the idea of the president doing things that, to put it mildly, are untoward, and to put it accurately, radically illegal? That's not a trivial question. Is the president above the law? That's a fair question to ask. In this case, it seems like the answer is yes. Whether the president is above the law from the standpoint of a legal precedent, or whether it's a standpoint from not necessarily being politically advantageous, or not having a party wanting to do the political heft, in doing so, either case, it boils down to the same thing, that the president of the United States was able to essentially invade a country, lie to the United States, break the law through torture, flouted the law over and over again, and still walk, and is out there finger painting right now. And part of the reason he's able to do that is because the president that got in office said, I'm looking forward, we're not looking back. Yeah, but there are horrors back there. There are terrifying things. How can you not look back in a situation where the president of the United States has done some ghastly, repugnant things, radically illegal things? How do you turn a blind eye to something like that? And yet, that president did, and everybody else did. And the new president comes out saying, I am going to do worse than waterboarding. I'm going to torture your families. Why? Why can he say that? He can say that because the last guy got a pass. The last guy got a pass. And here we are with Kavanaugh. Instead of Bush being put in prison, in a prison cell, in a cage, instead of that taking place, he's out there finger painting. And now you have people like Keith Olbermann saying they missed the Bush years because they think Donald Trump is somehow a complete departure from political precedent. George Bush, if he was an African dictator, would be in a cage right now. He would have been dragged before The Hague and put into a cage. We, as Americans, should want better. We can look at other countries and we can say that guy did X or that guy did Y, but from the perspective of us, George Bush wears a suit, you see him on television every day, so it doesn't come across to you as the guy is a war criminal. But I'm looking at the guy's deeds and I'm making the point to you that based on what everybody understands is true, how is he finger painting? And let alone how's not finger painting, how's Kavanaugh gotten away without being tarnished by what took place in the Bush administration? I put to you that if Bush was prosecuted, Kavanaugh doesn't get confirmed. He doesn't even get put up. Now, the catch to this is Donald Trump would have still put some horrible person up. There's no way of getting around it. Donald Trump was going to put up somebody that Donald Trump was going to be okay with, which means that he was going to be repugnant to the majority of the population. But Kavanaugh is a special case. This is something different to me. This is one of those things of you're putting somebody up that was part of a criminal cabal that took this country into a war on the premise on a lie, on a complete lie. Kavanaugh should be radioactive. The fact that Kavanaugh is not radioactive is to some degree because we didn't do anything about Bush. You prosecute, not because it's politically expedient, but you do so in order to prevent the behavior from taking place again. The thing is, if the Democratic president came in and did that, that Democratic president was going to be also held liable to the precedent that he set. Meaning whatever prosecutions take place from the standpoint of Bush will also now apply as a certain degree of law and legalities around the next president, meaning the president in office, meaning if Obama needs to have drone strikes where he's killing thousands of human beings, then that may be against the law if you make a president under the George Bush being prosecuted for doing the same thing. It's not just the political lift, it's also not wanting to put constraints on the imperial presidency. Kavanaugh is being confirmed to some degree because the Democratic Party and Obama didn't necessarily want to take that lift. Didn't want to take the lift. Personally, what they should do, at least what I think they should do, is go after Kavanaugh for what are lies. Did he break the law? And if you lie under one of those Senate Judiciary Committees or under Senate questioning, is that illegal? I think the answer to that is yes. That's far easier to prove as opposed to going back 40 years to try to figure out what happened in some kind of sexual encounter or some kind of forced sexual encounter. Kavanaugh should be impeached. What would Republicans do if it was a Democrat? I put to you that Democrats should do the same. Let's see who's here. We have people here. Only Americans can constantly re-envision things working out somehow. It ain't gonna work out. It ain't gonna be up to us. It's already over. The order of chaos. Stop expecting Dems to be on your side. I don't think they're on my side. Fuck AJ Frontman. Yeah, I don't think Democrats are on my side. I don't think that at all. I don't know where you get that from. Oh, you think because I'm against Kavanaugh that I think, oh God, no, that's shallow thinking. You should look at Ralph Nader's Twitter feed. Look at Ralph Nader's Twitter feed. Do you honestly believe that Ralph Nader is a Democrat? But I guarantee you this, Ralph Nader doesn't want Kavanaugh on that seat. The reason has nothing to do with the Democratic Party. This is not a labels issue. I don't want Kavanaugh on that seat because Kavanaugh is going to be setting precedent in law for the next 40, 50 years, providing it doesn't drop dead sooner. That's why I don't want Kavanaugh on the seat. That has nothing to do with the Democratic Party. They may be the thing that's trying to stop him from getting on, but that has nothing to do with me. My focus on this has to do with what is the real world implications of Kavanaugh getting on that seat. And what is Kavanaugh going to be doing for the next 40, 50 years? The case for Exxon that's coming up. What do you think Kavanaugh is going to rule on that case? Workers' rights. What do you think Kavanaugh is going to rule on workers' rights? Reproductive rights. What do you think Kavanaugh is going to rule on those things? I'm making a point to you that once he gets on that bench, Kavanaugh can do whatever Kavanaugh wants. And what Kavanaugh is probably going to do is partisan actions. And yeah, potentially protecting the president from any wrongdoing. This guy was a Bush lawyer. And he was there in his position seeing all of the things that Bush was doing. I'm trying to give you this idea of temperament. And temperament may be the wrong word. Let's say political temperament. And to put somebody on the bench like that, after being with somebody who essentially was a war criminal, the question becomes, why not use the attack from the standpoint of this guy was a part of a criminal cabal? The problem is the Democratic Party never made a big stink about it when they took over, in which case Bush went fingerprinting. It's hard to call it a criminal cabal, and the question is, you didn't think it was a criminal cabal when Obama first took office. Why are you saying it's a criminal cabal now? The attack that needed to take place then, that would have allowed you a building system, like you could say, an evidentiary path where you could point to and say this guy is a criminal. Again, Trump would have picked somebody else that was just as repugnant, but it wouldn't have been him. It would have been him. He's particularly repugnant. Why didn't they make a big stink? They didn't. I think I answered that. They didn't make a big stink for two reasons. I mean, one, they didn't want the political lift, meaning they didn't care that much. Like me, I cared. I was like, they killed 1 million people. That's a big fucking deal. How does that register as a big deal? Why is there nothing in you to care that much to push back on stuff like that? A, they didn't care. There was nothing in the Democratic Party anyway. There was nothing in them that cared. Anything that they mentioned from the standpoint of bitching at Bush on this was politics. It's politics. The second part has to do again with the constraints on the presidency. It's like the moment that you open the door, you're stuck with what comes out. If you open that door and what comes out is essentially there's constraints and rule sets around the presidency, well, then the new president is also going to be constrained by those. Good. That's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. By the same token, if you yourself was that person that was going to be under the constraints, you may be less inclined to go through with it. Baltazar 228, I'd call not trying Bush an abomination. Oh God, that one's funny. An abomination. An abomination. I love that. I love that. Yeah, Bill, it looks like the thing's not popping up. It's not working. Streamlabs better up their game, man. They've been... There's like a bug in the system. An abomination. I love that. I love that. The Democrats are paid opposition. Our Democratic Party is a Republican Party 15 years ago. Yes, Reagan couldn't get elected today because he passed gun regulation. Yes. But they're not... I don't think they're paid opposition. I think they want to win. They just don't have a core. They don't believe in anything. It's like they're corporate stilts of sorts. Like there's nothing there. Like there should be something in you that says we can't have the president doing this. There's not. It's like chess. I mean, ultimately, there's no point in time where there's been like a disconnect. Like the actions that took place then are correlated with the actions that take place now. And back then you had BRET Kavanaugh in a criminal cabal that killed and tortured and murdered and mass surveilled the entire country. They flouted the law on multiple occasions. The lawyer that was associated with it is now going to be put on the Supreme Court. Any cases that come up involving, let's say, Bush crimes, what do you think Kavanaugh's going to vote on? How do you think he's going to vote on that? Do you think he's going to protect the Bush administration, or do you think he's going to recuse himself? You already know the answer. The DNC is not a political party. They're paid actors playing out a Punch and Bunch of Judy stage theater production. I disagree with you. I mean, see, you're looking at failure, and you're saying they fail so much because they're not necessarily a real political party. They're just, these kind of corporate stand-ins. I don't think so. I don't think that's the way it is. I think they fail so much because they're eating themselves. The philosophy of the Republican Party is perfectly okay with this idea of maximizing cash and profit and everything else. Ultimately, they're using special interest groups in order to kind of make their elections work, in addition to a few useful idiots that come out and vote against their own self-interest. But the fact is, the Democratic Party shouldn't lose races to the Republican Party. Like, what the Republican Party is putting out is ghastly. And it's mentally unpopular if you're just asking people about it. The Democratic Party is just so feckless, however, that, they still lose to people who are knuckle-dragging maniacs. Now, the Sam Cedars of the world look at this and say the problem here is not the fact that these guys lose to knuckle-dragging maniacs. The problem here is that other people who are not getting their interests represented don't vote for them. Why aren't you voting for this corporate hack? That's essentially their thing. We're going to deal with the people who say that, hey, these are corporate hacks, and these guys are not representing the interests of the population. And we're going to say that the people who are saying that is the problem, not necessarily the fact that they're not representing the interests of the people that they're supposed to. Let's see. Brazilian election. If you want to see Trump on steroids with competence, look at the neocon party from Brazil. So, I've seen the cool stuff in Brazil, and we'll talk about it in a few. Supreme Cohort, I love that. The Federalist Society had claimed the list he gave to Trump with BK on it, had 24 other equal names, most without baggage. I wonder if the GOP push Brett Kavanaugh through just to silence any chance of Brett Kavanaugh rejection and using that to go after Thomas. That's interesting. Eye of the needle. It's easier to fit a camel through the eye of a needle in the desert than it is to fall off an needle. It's easier to fit a camel through the eye of a needle in the desert than it is to fall off an ATV in the shadow of the Great Pyramids of Giza. You know what's funny? That is kind of slightly badass in a weird backwards way, in a funny sort of way. Hundreds of candidates. It's not like the GOP doesn't have hundreds of replacements for Brett Kavanaugh that have the same views and much better records. Is Brett Kavanaugh a hill worth dying on? At a certain point, I think it has to do with more of, we put this guy up, and this is the guy we're going to push through. And there's a certain amount of political power that's demonstrated by pushing your guy through, as opposed to having to recall and put somebody else up. It's not so much that there's somebody who's equal. It has nothing to do with it at that point. It has everything to do with the political optics of, am I going to get my guy through, or am I going to have to pull my guy? Well, I'm going to get him through. I mean, otherwise, like you said, they would have just pulled him. They have other people, less baggage, just as bad and just as heinous. And it's very possible that the very reason that Kavanaugh was chosen was because of his views on the presidential power, this imperial presidency, and whether or not that person can be held up for war crimes, for illegalities. So, all right. I'm going to end this because I got a lot of more videos and it's like 1 a.m. here. So, by the way, to be frank, I can't believe they tried the strategy. They simply didn't have enough to make it stick. Yeah, I mean, you're talking about something like 40 years ago. Not to mention, I read one of the tweets that says something like, I think they said Senator Feinstein said on a letter, and they could have had the FBI investigating for all of it. I don't think they wanted the FBI investigating. I mean, look, I'm only going by what happened, not necessarily what they could have done. I suspect that the reason they did it the way they did it is because they didn't have anything to go with it in the first place. It's, hey, somebody has an allegation. Now, that's assuming that the allegation is real. I think she's real. I think she's being earnest. I could be wrong, but I don't know. The fact is, if you don't know what's going to come up, do you really want the FBI investigating for like 2 or 3 months? These guys are politically astute enough to know that if you have an investigation that's going for 3-4 months in the public and the FBI comes back with nothing, that looks bad. That makes it look like there's nothing there. Now, ultimately, them coming back with nothing could just mean we can cooperate or, make heads or tails of this, which is probably more likely than not. It's 40 years ago. Feinstein threw this like a bomb after, because that's all they had. I mean, for the most part, they tried to make it stick. I would argue that to some degree they did. I mean, granted, they pissed a bunch of people off in the process of doing this, getting Republicans more active, but the point of it was to stop Kavanaugh. And the only arrow that they had in their quiver was this particular allegation. And they politicized it to the hilt because that's all they had in their quiver. Now, people may not like that, Um, fair enough. But fact is, we don't necessarily know whether or not Kavanaugh did it or not. It is very possible that Kavanaugh did do exactly what Ford is saying he did. There's no way to know. And let's be honest, that a sham investigation over the course of a week is not going to bring that up. If HA is saying that, oh, that's embarrassing. That's embarrassing. That investigation was a sham, to say the least. David Cruz, thank you, David. I appreciate it, man. Thank you. Yeah, man. Look, they tried to make it stick. I still say, how's the president a king? Right. Am I wrong on this? George W. Bush literally invades a country with cherry-picked evidence and information, and in doing so, expends the life of 4,000 Americans, not to mention 1 million Iraqis, not to mention over 100-something Brits. There were no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. Full stop. This wasn't necessarily a mistake, and even if it was a mistake, there still should be consequences for that mistake. They cherry-picked information. They lied profusely, and then they end up torturing human beings, vacuuming them up in various parts of the globe, many of which were innocent, and not just many of which were innocent. You had this weird situation where they were torturing human beings in order to try to create a link, because one never existed in the first place. That president steps down and goes about his day. How does that work? Now, understand that The Hague can't necessarily prosecute, at least because there's all sorts of stuff around the way that the United States operates that tries to shield itself from other laws, especially the criminal court, International Criminal Court, including I can't even think of the name of the act, but essentially that the United States would do everything in its power in order to get people that are pulled by the criminal court. It's all sorts of rules around shielding people from the international court. So it's not going to come from that, unless it's the black sites in Afghanistan become an issue. And the reason why it's Afghanistan is because even though the United States is not a signatory to the International Criminal Court, Afghanistan and some of the countries that we've been operating are. And because they are signatories, they can still investigate in that sense. Laura Glennie, there was an illegal deal with Justice Kennedy and Trump to see Kavanaugh. He wasn't on the original Federalist list. What was the illegal deal? I don't know what the illegal deal was. You could be right. I do remember something with Justice Kennedy. They were. I remember something about this, but I don't know exactly what it was. Y'all watch Vice exposure of the FBI repression against black activists. I haven't seen that yet, Marshall. I haven't seen that one. When can we all run around using bloody hatchets of ID politics in each other? Why would we try to be rational, Gardner? I just wished that the conversation or the argument about Kavanaugh revolved around this guy came from the Bush administration, and Bush administration was a criminal organization during the time, in our history, not this rehabilitation of George Bush just because people hate Donald Trump. He was a goddamn war criminal. Let's be honest. Pre-chosen, he would have gotten in without much of a whimper if it was Clinton, yes. Yes. Ford didn't even want to do it at first. Now, she says she's done and will not pursue it further. Yeah, that's the other part. This isn't, this became so politically gross. I don't know if it's an easier argument to make for something like this, or if it's an easier argument to make going along the lines of Bush. You may get some Trump supporters that would agree with you on this idea of George Bush was a criminal president, and as a criminal president, with these foreign wars, he's wasted X amount of trillions of dollars and X number of lives, and we're trying to stay out of these wars, and so we want to attack him on this case. The thing is, Democrats are so politically gross that it's hard to get above this idea of supporting Democrats, because you're not supporting Democrats, if that makes sense. I'm saying that in a weird way. The political body that's doing something or trying to stop Kavanaugh, I don't care what that political body is. It's the fastest ostrich moving, so I jump on it. Ralph Nader, who is not a Democrat in the least, is on Twitter flipping out about this, as he should. People should. The thing with Bush came up a few times where he was evasive in his answers. But I gotta be honest, that's a bigger deal to me than something that may or may not have happened 40 years ago. And I believe her testimony. I don't think she's lying. Like Gardner said, she didn't even want to come forward originally. Again, that could be a political spin. The sad part about this is that there's a reality here that won't ever get touched. It is very possible that Ford was molested. It is very possible that she was assaulted. It is possible that the person who did it was Kavanaugh. All of that's true. That's possible. Trump supporters looked at this as Democrats are being political, pure politics, and completely ignored the fact that there was a human being at the center of this that actually may have been assaulted. Now, not just may have been assaulted, is now in somewhat of a firestorm just for stepping forward saying, look, I was assaulted. They were making a big deal about how long it took her to come forward and all this other stuff. That stuff is nonsense. You have no idea how you would respond to something like that. You have no idea how long it would take you to come forward or say anything, and if you say anything at all. And I'm saying this from personal experience. I was assaulted when I was young, I think, 7, 8 years old. I didn't tell anybody. I didn't necessarily internalize it as if this was my fault. I knew exactly whose fault it was. It was the person who assaulted me. And I was smart enough as a kid to not necessarily take that to heart. I, for the most part, just ignored it and just looked at it as this was a bad day. We move forward and we deal. My mom found out when I was 24. 24. Think about that. Like, you're talking about something that took place when you were like 8, and you don't necessarily tell anybody until you're like 24. Now, I have various reasons on why I didn't necessarily tell her. But my point is saying this is just, you have no idea how you will respond to certain situations. And people looking at her saying, she's this or she's that, there's no way for you to know. This became ridiculously partisan. Ridiculously partisan. Forget the fact that they were potentially perfectly willing to put a rapist on the Supreme Court if indeed he did rape her. They didn't care. Now, don't get me wrong, the Democrats didn't care either, but in their sense, their not caring allowed them to be completely in her corner without any questioning or any doubt that something took place. It became a partisan affair. Missing the fact that a woman was actually at the end of this. It's fucked up. The Republicans use the term like mob rule to refer to the majority of Americans now wanting, Brett Kavanaugh. The same term was used, by the way, for Hitler. Hashtag real news. If they wanted to include Ford in the attack, that's fine, but make it the main and only thrust was dumb. I guess they wanted to try to use the Me Too movement. I mean, maybe they looked at it as we don't necessarily have anything else. Fact is, maybe they looked at it, they didn't have anything else. I don't know. Credibility, man. Yes, creative experiments. Democrats have lost their credibility after rigging primaries and calling anyone who didn't vote for Hillary Clinton misogynist. Now, sexual assault is considered a political hatchet. Yes. Yes. Especially used in the way they did it here. Like, this completely... I think part of the attack had to do with Collins. They needed 3 votes, 2 votes, assuming that they could get everybody on their side, meaning all of the Democrats. So you would have gotten 49. So they needed 2 to flip. I think the thought was, if this is sexual assault, then we can put a ton of pressure to bear on people like Collins. She's a woman, after all. Let's use identity politics to the hilt. And let's use identity politics in the most raw, vicious form. This person was assaulted. Now, you look at Susan Collins and says, are you telling me that as a woman, that doesn't matter to you, that I've been sexually assaulted? How are you going to let that fly? Then you have a bunch of women in Susan Collins' office. Are you really going to let this fly? Are you really going to let this fly? You're a woman, and this woman is... Yeah. Yeah. It's a weapon at that point. But keep in mind, the moment that you make it a weapon and miss the fact that there's a person there, then other people who are your opponents are going to look at this and say, that's a weapon, and the person matters less. Only that it's a weapon. The order of chaos. Our Republicans and Democrats don't want real rational discussions. No, they want on issues to happen. They would do anything to prevent. Yeah, look, it has nothing to do with rational issues or discussions. It has everything to do with power. Understand what I mean by this. There's never been a point, at least not in our recent history, where a Democrat goes to the floor, makes a speech, and a Republican comes down and says, you know what, you were right. I thought something different. No, these are partisan actors that have very specific goals that they want to accomplish. The arguments that they make are just commiserate with what they want to accomplish. This has nothing to do with what's in the best interest of America. This has nothing to do with what's in the best interest of individuals. This has everything to do with how can we put more money into the hands of people with already gargantuan bank accounts. What do we need to do it? Do we need to get rid of health care? Fine. We can get rid of the taxes associated with making sure people got health care. Get rid of that. Can we get rid of... That's what it's about. The Democratic Party is not that far from that. And if you were in a different country, would be a right-wing party. They've lost credibility, which makes this argument that much even harder to get over the finish line. So yeah. His testimony was more disqualifying than the accusation of sexual assault. Say, Lou, I like Bernie Sanders' argument on this, actually. Bernie Sanders kind of makes this point of, look, we need to talk about law because he broke the law when he lied. Now, that's a yes or no. Like, that's not the FBI going back 40 years. That's the FBI interrogating. What did he say? What is the statement? And is the statement true or false based on the paperwork and the information that we have at our disposal? That's a true or false. That should be an area where Democrats and Bernie Sanders pursues. Why wouldn't it be? If the goal is to stop Kavanaugh, why are you stopping? If it was a Republican, would the Republicans stop trying to take that person off the bench? The answer is no. That they were willing to literally go a year without putting anybody on the bench. The Republican Party went after Obamacare, 40, 50 votes after the fact it was passed? Why would you stop now? You have somebody who's on the Supreme Court that was associated with a war criminal and may be a rapist. Why would you stop? Why would you stop? All right, I'm going to end this because this is getting far longer than I thought. Lying in court, yeah, he lied. He committed perjury, yes, he committed perjury. That's another video. I didn't want to do a ton of videos on Kavanaugh, even though I had like 2 videos in my head that I wanted to do on Kavanaugh. The assault to get him out of the Supreme Court shouldn't stop. I'm saying it should not stop. And that just shouldn't stop. The Supreme Court must be looked at as a political body. And being looked at as a partisan political body, it should be treated as such. Not this impartial thing that floats above it all. No, it should be treated as a political body. And constraints need to be put around it like any other political body. He may be a rapist, but he is perjured. Yeah, he perjured. That's my point. Like, that's an easier argument to make than a rapist argument. Expecting despicable torturers to be wise, that is a game. They don't care about us. No, they don't care about you. Laura, they don't care about you. That's not their objective. God known, the memo is white men are victims. White men are victims too. The perjury argument won't stick to Kavanaugh to most of those lies he told merely because of the positioning of the questions. Whether they stick or not, you should make the case. You shouldn't take the position that they're not going to stick just because you don't think they're going to stick. You should make the case. Perjury needs to prove he intentionally lied for a purpose. Okay. You still should make the case. Yeah, you got to make the case. I mean, I was walking back to the house after getting a video card, not the video card, the additional Wi-Fi. And the only thing that's open is a Italian joint, and I purchase what I need to purchase. I'm starving, and he says the only thing we have is lasagna, otherwise we're closed. And I said I'll take it. And I sit outside and I watch these guys dance and all. They're doing the flamingo when one of the waiters turns the music up and the family just starts dancing. I didn't want lasagna. And when you're in foreign countries, when they offer you something like this, you don't necessarily know what you're going to get. It's a grab bag. It could, yes, it's going to be lasagna, but the version of lasagna, who knows? But whatever. I'm starving. And my wife is at home doing whatever my wife is doing. If I don't get anything, I go home hungry. Absolute. As an absolute. Like, if I don't get this, my chances are gone. It's absolute. Taking the lasagna, there's a chance. Even if it's a 20% chance, there's a chance I like it. Oh, God, I love this. In which case, I can get something to eat. I guess my point here is it has to do with the probability. One gives you a chance, the other has zero chance associated with it. They should make their case. In the same way that Obama should have put Merrick Garland on the Supreme Court and forced them to put one lawsuit after the next in order to rip Merrick Garland away from that, they should make their case. I mean, after you got a war criminal on the Supreme Court. I mean, for fuck's sake. For fuck's sake. The guy was right there as George Bush was torturing and ripping apart human beings. It was right there when George Bush was sending our military, leveraging the bravery of the men and women that are in our military to kill and slaughter other human beings in another country that did nothing to us. That's the guy that's on the Supreme Court. His life should be a living hell. You should not allow him to stay on the Supreme Court. You should use whatever is in your power and at your disposal to go after and rip him off that seat. That's where I'm at. That's where I'm at. Total impartiality. It's not that I believe in total impartiality. I guess there's a difference between a partisan biased political actor as opposed to somebody who may have a slant but is interpreting the Constitution. Like, it's where your bias is. It's gross partisanship. When Mitch McConnell held up Merrick Garland, he was being grossly and partisan. He wasn't fulfilling his obligation from the standpoint of the Constitution of the United States. He was fulfilling what he wanted to do for his party. What he wanted to do for his party was vastly and radically more important to him than anything associated with the country itself. You don't matter. That's my point. It's class war, not identity politics. Yes, the issue is class, not race, not identity. Feminism is a reaction to men's terrible behavior and culture. Yes, men should change ourselves to build more unity among the working class majority. That is true. Yes, that's true. That is true. All right. Thanks, media. Yeah, thanks, media, indeed. So was the lasagna good? No, it wasn't. It wasn't. I'm starving. And everything's closed. I think my wife ate it. I think she liked it. At the very least, she was able to get something. So, all right. If you guys enjoyed the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support through Patreon. Thanks all. And thanks to everybody that contributed. Let's see, one more. Beltazar always tells me to check this, so let's check this. Yeah, and I'm gonna check the Brazilian election. I've been reading up a little bit on it just as it was taking place and as they were taking out, as it was putting, what is his name? I can see him. They put him in jail. Lula. Yeah, Lula. The one that they put in jail in order to prevent him from running in the race, even though he's the most popular person in the race. He's part of the Workers' Party. So, yeah. All right. Laura H. Gardner, yeah, I hear you. I'm in Thailand, so I'm not affected by the media monster. I see worldwide a beautiful change. I'm glad you do, Laura. Glad you do. It hurts. It hurts a lot. It aches. It's swollen. Yeah, that was a fuck fest. The guy stopped short. If you watch the video, I'm coming up close on him because they wanted everybody to kind of be in a line. And I would move around because I didn't necessarily want to be directly behind him because of the sand and everything else. Not to mention, he had a tendency to stop short. And so when he did that, I would stop or slow down, and my wife would have to slow down. And so she would nearly hit me on more than one occasion because he would stop short. And so in this case, one guy was filming, the other guy was in the SUV, the ATV. Everything is going well. The entirety of the trip, no issue. And out of the blue, he stops. He just stops short. And the ATV, I try to slow down, but I think I might have either hit the gas or something like that just in the scramble to slow down. Tank off the ATV. And apparently the ATV flipped over, freaked my wife out because from her angle, you don't get to see the entirety of the crash. You only see a part of it. Apparently the entirety of it was much worse. This could have went bad. It could have went really bad. Did he stop short or were you looking at the damn pyramids? No, he stopped short. At that point, I had seen the pyramids. In fact, at that point, I had seen the pyramids twice. I've been here before. Yeah. So, it was bad. This shit hurts. My wife was she's freaked out. She's like, oh, because it's surreal at that point. I hit my face. I slammed my face on the ground and it skid for a bit. The problem was the arm. My arm swelled up. It hurts. I think I either sprained it, pulled the ligament or tendon or something. I don't know. It hurts. The mom was too distracted by the quote #pyramids. I wasn't distracted by the pyramids. I had been here in 2008 and stayed here for 3 weeks. And no. We did that, the ATVs. We did ATVs in the pyramids. But at that point, we had seen that stuff for a while. So it wasn't, take a handful of pills and start streaming. I know, right? Pretty much. My thing was, my mom was like, did you go to the ER? I was like, well, no, because the only thing the ER was going to do is what the ER doing in the United States. With the only difference being I'll have to pay up front. So it's, all right, Mr. Thomas, here's a bunch of pills, and here's a sling for your arm. Okay, thanks. I can do that myself. There's a pharmacy. I could buy all sorts of pills in Egypt. You don't need a doctor note or a pharmacy thing to get pills in Egypt. And I could buy a splint and keep it moving. It's our garden. Normally, yeah, I agree with you, Garden, but I have no interest in trying to track down a doctor in Sharm. If it doesn't get better after a few weeks, then yes. But I don't think it's broken. If anything, it's either sprained, fractured, or like a ligament or something's pulled. It'll heal. It always does. It always does. But yeah, that crash was... the wild part about it, if you're bungee jumping out of an airplane, if you're doing something that's happening so quick that your brain can't comprehend it, it's kind of like that. It's like you're falling and you don't register the pain until a few seconds after it stops. So it's like when it stops, you're like, oh, that hurt. Everything hurts. And then it's like you're checking to figure out, all right, is anything broken? That felt bad. Is anything broken? Can I stand up? That's one of the, you're trying to check your systems, like a systems check. And, it's one of those things where your adrenaline hides pain. Like, so the endorphins that are running through your body at the time of an encounter, the whole idea being you're supposed to get from point A to point B before your body falls apart. I stood up. I felt okay. Everybody else was freaked out. And I got back on the ATV. And we went riding. And I wasn't going to stop. I'm of this mindset that you don't necessarily stop doing something just because something bad happens. You get up, dust yourself off, and keep going. And in this case, I wasn't necessarily feeling pain in my arm yet, so, we could do the ATV thing. And we were still going through hills and everything else. Like, I still was like, yeah, let's get an ATV. Let's do it. Let's do it. And I got to be honest, of all the shit I've done, there's a probability you're going to get injured at some point. Of all the things that could have went wrong, this wasn't the worst. It just hurts. Laura H., if you come to Thailand, it's very affordable to get medical attention. Thailand is going to be next... unless something happens on this trip that... I'm having a problem on the trip. I think I mentioned this before. Everywhere I go, I need a treatment. So I need a facility that can essentially do dialysis. The difficulty in doing a world trip, if you're on any type of medical thing, is that you need to arrange for those treatments in the various places that you're going. There's a financial constraint. So it's not a situation where you can have as many as you want. They cost. And so you have to plan based on how much it costs in a particular area. And so it's like, all right, so I need to be in this particular place on this particular date. Where can I get a treatment from? And then you start thinking a different way. All right, where can I get a treatment from? And then how can I get from point A to point B? My fixer stopped fixing. And so it ended up being left to my own devices in order to find places. That said, unless something goes miserably wrong where I can't find a spot in a few months, jumping over to Vietnam would be the next option. But we're not supposed to hit Southeast Asia until like January, February. So yeah. You're going to Thailand next week? Badass. Badass. Yeah, have fun. Be always respectful, no pointing toes. I don't point toes, at least I don't think I do. Put the dialysis machine on the ATV. For some reason, that's funny to me. I don't know why. Somebody pointed out that your head stayed on. That defies the laws of physics. No, my hat didn't stay on. It looked like it did in the beginning. Like when it felt like, it was just face planted. It wasn't even like a cool where it's like, it was just. The hat stayed. I don't think the hat stayed on when everybody stopped. If you listen, you can hear the guy speaking in Arabic, because it's like English is not the first thing that comes to your mind when shit happens. Like, oh fuck, but you're not thinking oh fuck just kind of comes out. Well, his first language is Arabic, so he's speaking Arabic. Yeah, the hat didn't stay on. Nothing stayed on. Like my shoes ripped, so my flip flop completely ripped. I think the hat went off. I don't think my clothes were ripped or anything, but that was impressive. I have to say, it was impressive. Progressive Voice stapled that hat onto Jamal's head before he left the States. My chosen destination in Africa would be Ethiopia. I loved Kenya, dude. Kenya is one of my favorite places, hands down. Hands down. And being in Kenya would allow you to go from like the Ethiopia and Uganda and some of the other places. If I go back to Africa, it would be doing that. I didn't know what to expect going into Africa, so we only booked it for like 2 weeks. I regret that. I regret that. I wish we would have started like South Africa and jumped to Kenya and then jumped to another. I loved it. It was one of my favorite spots. Did you spill your drink? I didn't have a drink. I split my face. I have scars all over and knots. But yeah, I got lucky. I did get lucky. All right, this video was supposed to be over with 30 minutes ago. So I will end this here. If you guys enjoy the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. You can always support the Patreon. Thanks all. I'll see you guys shortly. Oh, it's 1:30 in the morning. This video went too long. Yeah, I'll see you guys shortly. Thanks all.